You are listening to Cool 104.1, and this is Robert Ishoy, your host of Issues with Ishoy, for another fantastic show that we've got planned today. I have a guest. Now, I'm actually not in Sierra Vista. We are up in Tucson because I had to get the best expert on this topic that I could find. And I have found her, Sharon Megdal. I said that right?
You did, you did.
She is the director of the Water Resources Research Center with the University of Arizona.
That's right, Robert. Thank you. Welcome to my office.
Well, thank you so much for having us. You know, I mean, this is an important issue. We are going to talk about water in Arizona. And I got to tell you, I did a little bit of research on my own, nothing extensive, but just a little bit, and I got scared. I was like, oh my gosh, this is serious. So, and I actually read that it's kind of global. Am I right?
Yeah.
There's a water crisis.
Yeah, there are water issues all over the world. Sometimes it's too much water. Sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes it's the quality of the water. But just about everywhere there are water issues. And we certainly have plenty here in our region.
Yes. And, you know, in my show, we do concentrate on Cochise County. But I think for this topic, it kind of makes sense to talk about Arizona as a whole. And I will probably ask you questions that are mentioned, you know, Cochise County, but it's kind of a statewide issue, right?
It is a statewide issue, but something that's very important about water is, in many ways, it's a local issue. Now, we may have water that we're transporting from the Colorado River into central Arizona through the Central Arizona Project Canal, but then we have many communities, including a lot of your communities in Cochise County, that are mostly dependent on groundwater.
Right.
And that's a very local water supply. So yes, we can talk about things statewide, and some things apply everywhere in the state, but other things are more local. And in certain ways, Cochise County, I've described some communities there, like Wilcox is at the epicenter of
I read about
issues.
Wilcox, yes.
Yeah, so what I do quite a bit of is I give talks. I give talks to lots of groups. Sometimes I have 10 minutes, sometimes I have 40 minutes or an hour. But I always like to put things in the context of what's going on in the state. And, you know, how much water are we using and what are our water supplies? And groundwater in particular is a very important supply of water for communities throughout our state. And that's a supply that's not growing, and with demands growing and so forth. And in Cochise County, it's a very important water supply. So happy to talk about both local as well as statewide, global, whatever you want to talk about.
Because most of our listeners are tuned in from Cochise County. Oh, by the way, she is absolutely right. I did read 81% of the water in Cochise County is from groundwater. So we're not getting it from the Colorado River. We're getting it right there locally.
Yeah.
And there are Wilcox, you mentioned. I read they're worried about the water level of the ground right now.
That's right.
And that's just one place that is highlighted, but it's kind of a concern everywhere. So it's if you eat food and you drink water, this is a topic you probably will be concerned about, because I'm going to let you answer this. I think I know the answer, but how much of the water goes to agriculture compared to like homes?
Yeah. So in the state of Arizona, statewide, the Arizona Department of Water Resources estimates about 72% of the water extracted, diverted, used is a tricky word in water, because not all the water that's applied to agricultural fields is used growing the plants. Some of it seeps back down into the ground and so forth. But almost 3/4 of the water in Arizona is used by agriculture or diverted by agriculture. That's pretty close to the global number. Right. So we're not atypical in that regard. And it used to be higher, though. It used to be closer to 80, 85%. And also the actual number, whether it's 72% or 74 or 5%, we don't have exact numbers in certain instances, because in many places, agricultural water use is not measured or metered. That's one of the issues the state is trying to address or may address. And so sometimes it's based on estimates, and we're using satellite imagery now more for estimates than in the past because we have some images that are regularly collected. But it's a lot.
It's a lot,
I like
yeah.
to say it's not, it may be 70%, maybe it's 75%. I mentioned Arizona Department of Water Resources says it's 72% as of 2021. The U.S. Geological Survey puts out some data. They're releasing their 2020 data now. I haven't seen the numbers, but they might show 80%. So sometimes the numbers don't always match, but it's a lot.
Yeah. And I can see where there could probably be a conflict in some people's mind that, especially like, well, I did a show on housing, and the shortage of housing and the high cost of housing and rent, which kind of ties into water, because I was reading that there are some cities, as a matter of fact, there was one in Cochise County where they the developers have to show that they have 100-year supply of water for the new development, or it won't get approved.
Yeah, you bring up a very important issue for communities in Cochise County as well as in the state. So have to give you a little bit of a lesson here in groundwater management. In 1980, the state adopted the Groundwater Management Act. That was when Bruce Babbitt was our governor, and it was a really forward-looking piece of legislation that said in areas that are called active management areas, or AMAs, shorthand, you had to show that you have 100 years of water. Well, you have to have sufficient consumer protections, which later translated into rules that said to develop new community water uses, to subdivide land more than 5 ways, you have to show you have 100 years of assured water supply. And that there was no place else in the country. I don't think there even is any place else in the country now that does that. It was viewed as consumer protection. Only in the active management areas. Now, for years, the active management areas were basically in central Arizona. There's a Santa Cruz County AMA or Santa Cruz AMA, Tucson, Pinal, Phoenix, and then up in the Prescott area. However, in the last few years, there have been 2 new active management areas created, both in Cochise County.
Wow, just recently in 2 years.
There was a vote in, I guess it was 2022. There were 2 votes in Cochise County. One to form an AMA for the Douglas Basin, and the other to form an AMA in the Wilcox Basin. The Douglas vote passed. So there is an active management area now in the Douglas Basin. And then last December, the Department of Water Resources established an AMA for Wilcox. And that's very, very new. It's the first time since the 1980 Groundwater Management Act that an AMA was established by the Department of Water Resources Director. Because remember, I just told you that the Douglas one was voted on. So there's been a lot of activity in communities in Cochise County. So if you're in an active management area and they haven't finalized rules yet, it has to go through administrative rulemaking, but for there to be subdivided land of more than 5 plots, in order to be those lands to be sold and houses to be built, you have to show 100-year assured water supply.
So I can kind of see it's kind of like a scale. You got the housing issue where it would help if you had more housing to lower the prices and so people can have a home and live, and you want to have good, clean drinking water. But then on the other side, you want to eat food. And if you're going to eat food, you got to have agriculture. So the agriculture is going to take the lion's share of the water. Yeah, right. If we don't let them take the lion's share, we're going to probably have empty shelves at the store.
Yeah, it's, the situation we're in, and we started out talking about globally, but we have to look at the fact that we eat food. It's not always grown here in Arizona. people in other parts of the country and world eat food that is grown here in Arizona,
right.
particularly the vegetables out in Yuma in the wintertime, and the nuts that are grown, and the cotton that's grown that's exported elsewhere to make the shirts or whatever that we're wearing, and then they come back. So we are part of a national and global economy, but fundamentally, we have a growing population in the world.
Right.
We want people to eat foods with protein and so forth. And so there is the question of how is all this food going to be produced for this growing population, not only here in Arizona, but in the world? Yet we also need to have vibrant communities that have sufficient water. So it's a balancing act of where does the water go? Some people have said over the years, water flows uphill to money, so that there's concerns about could there be transfers of water from some areas to other areas? And we have laws in place that prevent transfers of groundwater from one part of the state to another, except with some exceptions. But it's a complicated issue. It is a complicated issue. And what I like to say, you know, and I may be kind of jumping ahead of where you want to go, but a lot of times people say, well, what can I do? What can I do to address water imbalance, the fact that we don't have enough water, or there's it's getting warmer and we don't have as much flow as the Colorado River. And the first thing I say is, know where your water comes from, and I don't mean the faucet. And some people don't even have water running 24/7 from a faucet.
Can I jump in?
Yes, please.
Because you just said that, and I read today, I was just reading, I was shocked at this. It said, this one article said there was 1.1 million people in the United States without any running water at their house.
Yeah.
That just really...
And there are many people in Arizona. The largest example of that percentage-wise is the Navajo Nation, where it's estimated about a third, if not more, of the households there do not have running water in their homes. They have to haul it, bring it there, and so it's here. It's California. It's other places. There are people in the United States that don't have
any
water.
running water.
And so that's why I always say, I want to qualify, you know, we take it for granted, those of us who do get reliable, good quality water 24/7, we take it for granted. We get upset if there's an interruption, you know, if there's construction going on and it breaks a line. But know where your water comes from. Does it come from the Colorado River? Does it come from underground? And pay attention to what your utility, if you're served by a utility versus an individually owned well. And you have plenty of people in Cochise County that have their own wells.
And shared wells. A lot of people on shared wells in Cochise County.
And understand the conditions there, because there are a lot of factors. So again, people should not take water for granted, but in fact, the reason that water is so reliably provided is that utilities, it's their job to make sure that water flows and it's clean and it meets water quality
standards. And that makes sense, because reading just a little bit, about some of the issues that are causing the water crisis, and of course, a lot of articles were about the droughts and global warming. And whether you believe in global warming or not, we don't get into politics on this show. It's just there are a lot of droughts, let's just put it that way, around the world that is causing some of the issues. But some of the other issues are man-made. I was reading about Mexico City. And I guess Mexico City, the water system is so old that it's leaking, and yet it's drying up. And they're very concerned. So, can you elaborate on that, Mexico City?
Well,
I mean, I know it's not in Cochise County, but I'm thinking a city of 14 million people that they say are at risk of going dry.
Yeah, so
that's scary.
Yeah,
they might all end up in Cochise County. What is it?
One doesn't know, but to the question of you can't, whether you call it drought, whether you call it climate change, whether you call it changing climate, you have to deal with the symptoms of what's happening, right?
Right.
That we do have warmer temperatures, we do have some reduced river flows, and importantly, that groundwater that we've talked about is mostly fossil groundwater. It's groundwater that formed due to formations and geological happenings so many years ago, and when we use it faster than nature replenishes it,
It's gone.
we risk either not having the water there at all, or having the quality of lesser quality because it's deeper, or it being more costly to pull out. So there are so many factors that we're having to deal with. And then I'm not a hydrologist, I should say for the audience. I'm an economist by training, and you may say, why are you working on water? But that's a whole other story, the story of my professional life, which we won't get into here. But I became a water person about 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago now.
She's an expert. 30
no,
years. You're an expert.
But through heading up a regional water district. I left academic life for about 15, 16 years, and I sometimes say I became reincarnated as a water person in that period of time. And so a lot of my knowledge of water is on-the-job training, right? And so I'm qualifying what I'm saying. I'm not a hydrologist, but Arizona, particularly the part we're in here in Tucson and where you are, we have some, very good aquifers. We have basin and range aquifers that have had and maybe still have quite a bit of water stored in them.
That's good news.
Even though we're extracting faster than nature replenishes.
But that's a bad thing.
So the thing, though, that's happened, and this is somewhat related, I don't know enough about Mexico City hydrology, but as you pull water out from these aquifers that are quite deep, what you start having is compaction. And in fact, Cochise County has a lot of fissuring, and where the land is kind of cracked because water has been pulled out and the land is sinking and it's separating and all kinds of things are going on. And so as you take out the water from the aquifers, sometimes there's sinking of the land. There could be this fissuring or cracking of the land. And then sometimes you then lose the capacity for that underground geological system to hold the water that's coming from the snowpack and so forth. So
these are actually cracks that you can visually see on the surface.
Yeah. And in fact, the Arizona Department of Water Resources, when it was holding some public meetings in Wilcox about forming an active management area there, they had a presentation by their chief hydrologist who showed numerous photos. And there are photos in the West Valley of Phoenix that show, and in California, that show where the land was maybe 40 years ago and where the land is now because
literally
of the
just sinking.
And there can be impacts
and
to
if your house is on top of that, you're in trouble.
And infrastructure. I mean, there could be roads that get affected by that. There are sometimes flood control projects where the flow of the waters actually changes. So in Mexico City, as I understand it, where we're not here to talk in depth about Mexico City, but the point is they have, as I understand it, is kind of like a bowl that they live in, and there's many, many millions of people there, and there is infrastructure, and this is not unique to Mexico City. Okay, a lot of places are dealing with drought. They might not have had drought in the past, and so you read about that, but this issue of older infrastructure where you're losing water in the infrastructure itself. And so if you have a utility that's sending water to its customers, but 30 to 50% or sometimes more of that water is lost between the delivery point into the system and the customer's homes.
Just lost in the ground.
And you might say, well, that's okay, it's recharging the aquifer, but That's not what utilities want to be in the business of. The
Right.
utilities want to have low rates of loss within their systems. And a lot of our utilities in Arizona do quite well with that because they're newer than some of the, older systems of older cities. But the issue of lost water, non-revenue water, is an important one for utilities.
Sure. I mean, even as a homeowner, you think, okay, if your water bill all of a sudden goes way up, there's more likely you got a leak somewhere
Right.
between the meter and your house.
That's right.
And you want to get that fixed because
Right.
it's costing you money, and maybe you're doing other things to conserve water, but it's just
Yeah.
leaking in the ground.
And one of the things that we want to do to be good water stewards at the community level is, first of all, we do want to have costs manageable, right? Nobody likes to pay more than they have to for any good or product that they buy. But we also want to match, to the extent we can, the quality of the water with the need for that quality water. So for drinking water, we need good quality water, right? We need that. But for outdoor watering, we don't need such good quality water.
I'm going to ask you about this because gray water. Now, I would love, because I have about an acre. I like to garden. I got my fruit trees down in Hereford, and that's kind of my
What are you growing? What kind of fruit trees?
I got apple, I got apricot, I got peach trees are incredible. They give me a lot.
I was wondering what you grow at that elevation because you're a little higher than we are here in Tucson.
Now, I'll tell you, they don't grow real fast. My trees are slow growing.
They're slow growing.
Very slow growing. But I do okay. And this year I have deer that want to come in and nibble on all my trees. And so they're bare down low. Let's put it that way. So they're eating all the new little leaves. But I love the garden, and I water by hand because I water by hand because I don't want to waste water. So I'll put I have like circles around my trees, and that's where I soak the water. So I try very hard, but I do use probably more water than my neighbors gardening. But I would love to have my gray water going out to. Not my vegetable garden, obviously. I'd want not there, but out to the trees and my pine trees especially. But how would it cost a lot of money? How do you go about doing a gray water system on an existing house? I visualize it being very expensive.
Well, yeah, and let's talk about, when we talk gray water, typically we're talking at the household level to take washing machine water, sometimes shower water, not the toilet water.
No,
that's the black water.
No.
That's not gray. That's where some of the colors come in, and divert it. Especially, do you have septic or are you on a sewer system?
I have a septic.
Yeah. So that's also a benefit of not having as much water go in your septic system, right?
Okay.
Isn't it?
I would think, yeah.
I don't know. I don't have a septic tank, but I know you have to clean it out periodically, and if it's too much water going in there, I don't know enough about septic systems, but it's a different calculus, I'll say. If you're on your own system, you're on your own well, septic, and you think about, okay, if I take some of the water from my home, then that's less water that I have to pump or spend money on and do that, because you are on a well. You're getting your drinking water from a well or on your system.
We're on a community well, not a private well. It's a community well.
How many people are on your?
I have no idea.
It's more than 15 hookups.
Oh yeah.
So you're having to meet drinking water standards from that. You have to have an operator,
right,
and all that. That's different from being on your own well, right?
Gotcha.
So the point is, if you're on a community water system, it could be a small one, it could be a very large one. You have to meet safe drinking water standards.
I would hope so.
For the drinking. But you don't need that for your outside. And if you don't have a centralized wastewater treatment system, if you can divert some of that water, even if it were just for the flowers or whatever right around your home, because you're not going to generate, it doesn't sound like you and your family is going to generate enough water to water all those trees. But if you can offset some of the water needs with that, then that's a good thing. But it's very interesting. Some communities, in Las Vegas is an example of this, they're very much in favor of reducing outdoor water use, the outdoor watering for trees
Yes.
and grasses and lawns. But they're not so interested in having you divert your shower water or washing machine water, because they want that to go through the wastewater treatment plant. And that has to do with return flow credits from the Colorado River, et cetera. But other communities, even like in Arizona, treated wastewater is a valuable resource to communities now. It's a very important component of it. And if you take your washing machine water and don't put it down the sewer into the wastewater treatment plant, they have less water going through the wastewater treatment plant. They have less water they may get credits from outside. In fact, Sierra Vista, I believe, is doing some recharge of treated wastewater to try to kind of bolster some of the near river supplies, so that the San Pedro doesn't run dry and so forth. And so it's a whole system. I like to, again, when I give these lectures, one of the things I usually show is a graphic of the water cycle. And I have in my office here where we're sitting a map on that side and a map on that side that both show a graphic of the water cycle. And the point here is that you have to look at it holistically. And what is it that you're doing to the recharge that happens after you water your trees? Because some of that water goes down and
some
it's
of
there.
it just goes in
so
the
it's
air.
a complicated system. But the main point is that we have to do a good job managing and stewarding our resources.
And infrastructure is important.
And infrastructure is important.
Because that's back in the day when you read on the news about Flint, Michigan. And I was shocked as an historian, was studying about ancient Rome. And ancient Rome had plumbing, but it was the rich people that had plumbing. But they made the mistake of using lead pipes because they didn't know any better. And some historians actually think that that's probably what led to some of the emperors like Caligula going mad, because they were drinking lead, water out of lead pipes. So that's not proven, but some historians think that's possible. And then here I am in the modern world reading about a city in the United States of America that had lead pipes. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, we learned that lesson from Rome.
Well, but there are a lot of cities. I grew up in New Jersey, and one of the other cities that has had lead pipe issues is Newark, New Jersey.
Really?
And I grew up in a town right near there. What we could spend some time talking about Flint, Michigan, but I'd like to make a point about it, even though it seems far away, and that is the issues with the lead pipes may have been there all along, but what seemed to exacerbate it or make it more known that there were problems is that an administrator decided that they were going to take water from a different source, a different river source, to save $100,000. And by changing the water source and changing the chemistry, that had some effect on the dislodging of some of the metals and so forth. And it's very interesting because here in Tucson, when the Central Arizona Project first came online in the early 1990s, we had a problem with old pipes, galvanized steel pipes or whatever they were, because the chemistry of the water changed. And then people's pipes were bursting at their homes. There was brown water. And so the point I'm making is that the decisions about kind of water treatment, water supplies, and whatever should be made by the experts in water. And there are many of them, and they're,
let's say not maybe by politicians.
I'm not going to say anything there.
I'll say it. She didn't say it. I said it. No.
Yeah, but the point is, in Flint, as I understand it, and again, I'm not an expert on it, but I've read up on it. It was an administrator at a city that was looking at the costs, and they switched from one river to another, and that was not a wise decision.
Now, just for our audience, I'm just going to break for a minute. You are listening to Cool 104.1, and this will be aired on August, first Sunday of August, if you're listening. And later, you can watch the the YouTube slash Cool FM Live version on Facebook and YouTube later that evening. And I'm going to put in a plug in for our sponsor, Ruby's Divine Chocolates, right there in Sierra Vista, down 92. Little chocolate shop, the best chocolates in Arizona, and other good foods. We have all kinds of different foods in there. So, little plug there.
Goes well, chocolate and water. You know,
yes.
we do a chocolate fest every February, right around Valentine's Day. And it's like chocolate, like water was one of our themes for that. So,
and this is my guest. If you just joined us, Sharon Megdal, and she is the director of the, I'm going to say it, the director of the Water Resources Research Center with the University of Arizona.
Perfect.
That's a mouthful, but I got it.
You got it. Yes.
And, obviously, 30 years of working in the water industry. And that's why we're here. We're actually up in Tucson with her because I had to get an expert to talk about this subject.
Thank you.
I mean, it's something obviously everybody has to be concerned about, and especially in places like Arizona, California, where we're experiencing serious droughts and water concerns. You know, and I think I got to tell you, I think about when I was a teenager or even a kid in California, and we always drank the water out of the hose. We always trusted the water in the faucet. And I remember my dad telling me, son, someday we're going to have to buy water. And I thought my dad was crazy because, water was almost free back then, you know? It was like, and I thought my dad was nuts. Someday we're going to buy water. And now, look at it. Everybody buys bottled or canned water. I mean, everybody. It didn't exist back then when I was a kid. We didn't have bottled water. Didn't exist. So I kind of am concerned because you think the first job of a society is to provide clean drinking water.
Right.
If they fail that, they failed, in my opinion.
But first of all, if I may,
Go
I'd
ahead.
like to put in a little plug for Arizona Cooperative Extension, because this water center is a cooperative extension center. And it is part of our purpose and mission to engage with the public and interact and interface. And Cooperative Extension has offices in all the counties, including Cochise County. They're actively involved in water education and so forth there. But I'm really delighted to be on the show with you.
I'm glad
because
to have you.
this is what I do. I do research and I teach graduate students and so forth. But I do a key role of mine and a passion and a love of mine is actually to talk about these things so that people can understand a little bit better what's going on, why maybe it's going on, and so forth. And it is complicated, but I really do like that. But I do want to say there are different reasons why people drink bottled or canned water. And that is sometimes for convenience, right? You're going for a ride in the car. You're driving here in our Arizona desert. You better have some water in the car. I got to tell you just a real quick funny story. I grew up in New Jersey, and water was not scarce. It wasn't anything that we typically talked about much or worried about much. And the very first time I drove across the desert was when I was a graduate student. I was doing my studies in the East. And my husband, we were pretty young, and we drove from California to Las Vegas in the desert, in the warm weather, and we didn't have a cooler with water. Luckily, we didn't. We didn't break down. So the point is, we need to have water when we travel in the car, and sometimes the easiest way is to have some bottles of water,
especially when you go hiking
and hiking and all that. And so there are reasons for it, but it is the fact that tap water coming out of people's faucets is of good quality. Some people don't like the taste. I happen to like the taste of Tucson water that's coming out of my faucet. Some people think bottled water is safer. Sometimes it's not going through as rigorous testing as the water tap. And it is more expensive if one is a customer of a utility, it's much more expensive.
Yes.
But we have this for our guests for convenience. And but I took it out of our fountain there that you can fill the bottle from.
So generally speaking, you would say Tucson as well as Cochise County, the water out of the tap is
Yeah.
pretty safe,
Yeah, and
or very safe. It's safe.
it's except that people are concerned about some of these new things in the water, or things that are newly measured, like PFAS. These polyfluorinated, I can't even say all the words that go into the PFAS. And the EPA, it's been in the news just recently because in the prior Biden administration, there was a move to establish drinking water standards for a couple of the PFAS contaminants, or whatever you might want to call it. And President Trump's administration recently announced that they're moving forward with some, but they may change others. And so what's I think important for the public to know is that there are these ongoing dialogues. There are treatment technologies that can deal with address removing them, but some of them are very expensive, and it will be incremental, activities to get them out. And so we sometimes don't know enough about things that are in the water, in the food even that we eat. And so there is active discussion and involvement in looking at some of these constituents and say, do we need more regulation or more treatment of these? And these are things that are actively being discussed by utilities.
Yeah. And like you said earlier,
and policymakers.
Yeah.
Policymakers.
And again, yes, you said earlier, we need the experts, and then we need the politicians to listen to the experts and then make good decisions
Exactly.
when it comes to water in our food.
Right.
And a lot of people are genuinely concerned, not just about possibly places going dry, but also the quality of water maybe going down in the near future because of infrastructure. But I also have read that there's a lot of people, I even read about 3 ranchers in Cochise County that are actually doing things on their ranch to conserve water.
Yeah.
One was a Tombstone Ranch. I can't remember if I wrote them all down. I think I might have had it somewhere. But so they're doing things. Cochise County has believe it or not, a toilet rebate program.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
Where you buy one of the more modern toilets that use less water,
Mm-hmm.
you can apply for a rebate. So there's a lot of people out there in our government and our farmers and our ranchers
Absolutely.
that are really working hard for this issue. And we as homeowners, we kind of just don't think about it, or we do think about it, but we don't act. So we kind of take our responsibility too, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, everybody's a water user. I always say everybody's a water stakeholder. You mentioned about, policymakers and decision makers. And yes, science is very important for those policies. But what I say to people, again, when I'm speaking, is that everybody is a water user, and everybody above a certain age, at least, is a decision maker influencer.
Okay.
Meaning
that's
that
good.
our elected officials, our appointed officials, they're responsive to their electorate, to their people. And so if people have questions or have concerns, they ought to voice them. I always tell people, I get questions a lot about, or not that a lot, but periodically about people want to move here or there, and what is it about, the water there. And what I tell is that if you're going to be served by a water utility, contact that water utility and ask them questions, because I don't make recommendations if this one's a good utility or that one's not. But it's reasonable to say, where are you getting your water from, and how reliable are the sources. If a community has one well, you may, I'm sure you remember how many summers ago was it when Tombstone, I believe it was, had a problem with one of its wells, and maybe its main well. And I remember seeing in the news that water had to be trucked in, and crates of bottled water,
Right.
because there are communities, particularly small communities, that may rely on a single well
And that
for
one
their
goes
community.
dry,
And if that one breaks, and there's a failure in a pipe or a pump, or if they have to dig a deeper well because water levels are dropping, that can cause
Yeah.
some concern and dislocation for the community.
So I think in general, we can safely say that, yes, there is a water crisis in a sense because of the droughts. There is some infrastructure system. But overall, Arizona is kind of a leader in water conservation. Am I right?
Right. And
So
and yes.
we got a lot of people, not just recently, but as you stated earlier, that took this seriously
Right.
and are making efforts. And so generally, I'm going to say in Cochise County, as well as up here in Tucson, we won't forget about Tucson. You're our big neighbor. There's a lot of good people working on this to preserve our water supply and the quality as well.
Right. Yeah, we try to stay ahead of the curve, right? The utilities want to make sure they've got sufficient water to serve the people. But also at the same time, we as users of water, we need to be responsible and don't waste water, because there's nothing gained by wasting water,
Right.
and there are things that we can do. And as we think about it from the big picture, Cochise County is not supplied by the Colorado River, and if it were in central Arizona, a big question now is with the reduced flows on the Colorado River, what is that going to mean to the supplies coming into central Arizona? Some of the river users have more senior rights than central Arizona, a big, huge issue. And so how do we make the best use of the different water supplies available to us? The reclaimed water, the treated wastewater, do we recharge it in the ground? Do we even go, which cities like Phoenix, Tucson, and Scottsdale are actively looking at, do we treat it for direct use and delivery to the pipeline? One of the things we do here at the Water Center, so I'll say this maybe so the listeners can look us up. Can I say my website? So,
Sure, you bet.
So the Water Resources Research Center's website is wrrc.arizona.edu. So if they type it in, that'll take us to our website. We have a lot of good resources there. We have fact sheets for every county. The Cochise County one needs to be updated to show the additional AMA being formed on the map. We don't have an updated map on that yet, but there's a lot of good information. We have publications, and we host webinars, and we record them and we post them under our water webinar series. We had one about we co-hosted one about the PFAS issue that I mentioned earlier. We had one about advanced water purification, about how we might use our wastewater highly treated and put it right back in the system. And we have others. So we'd really encourage. That's a part of our mission, and we'd really encourage.
And your office is
watchers.
Available for that. So
yes.
Whether it be a school or a business, am I correct?
Well, and in our building, you're in our building. Aside from the Water Center being here, we house in this building Arizona Project Wet. And that is a K-12 education program. They've probably had water festivals over the years in Cochise County, and they're there for training the teachers to bring it into their curriculum. There's so much opportunity for partnerships and collaborations, and even you mentioned Cochise County and the toilet rebates. I don't know if it still exists, but Cochise County, Sierra Vista had a very active rebate program of rain barrel, related to rain barrels as well. And so Cochise County's, out there at the forefront as well.
Yep, we're taking a leadership. So Good news for our listeners. Yet, at the same time, we don't want, like you said at the very beginning, don't take our water for granted.
Yeah.
Do what you can to be a smart water user. But we're not in terrible shape compared to a lot of places in the world that have a serious water crisis. So kind of good news. I feel better because I did the research and I read all this stuff about, the negative side.
But we do have challenges.
We do have challenges.
We don't want to dismiss those. And there are some, this issue that we started out talking about, and that is the local nature of groundwater, and that it's not being replenished as fast as it's used.
We need some rain.
Well, even rain won't be enough to
Really?
fix it. And so that's a big question of how do we manage groundwater in these areas outside of the AMAs and even in these new AMAs. So lots of work to be done. I would hope the local listeners are motivated to get
Yeah.
engaged and,
Right.
and learn
Get
more.
educated,
Yes.
and then try to get engaged.
Right,
And
exactly.
And take it serious, because, like I said, without water, we don't exist.
That's right.
I mean, the bottom line is, and we
That's
need,
right.
and so we got to have our water. No, you can't just drink beer all the time. My listeners know. Well, there's water and beer, but
Exactly.
no, you can't just drink. You have to have water. You have to have water to grow food. So without water, we're in trouble. So we do need to take it seriously as a
Absolutely.
society. And I like the fact that you said earlier that it is more of a local issue. So in Cochise County, if you're in Wilcox, then worry about the water in Wilcox. If you're up in Tucson, worry about the water in Tucson, because that's where it really counts.
That's right.
What you said earlier. And I want to thank you, Sharon. Thank you
Yes.
so much for doing this show. I think a lot of people have a lot of questions about the water in Arizona and in our county, the quality, are we going to have a water shortage? And I think we've kind of relieved some of that, hopefully.
Yes, and we do need rain, though. Let's hope for a good
Yes.
summer of rain
Yeah.
here in central and southeastern Arizona.
I first moved here in 2007, and I remember monsoon season. It would rain every day without fail. You could watch it roll in, and it would pour. And now the monsoon seasons seem like hit or miss.
I don't remember a drier winter and season than we've had right now. And the numbers show that. If you look, we've had some of the lowest rainfall on record in last year in 2024. And 2025 is not looking particularly good. So let's hope for a good monsoon
season. And as
season.
a gardener, it hurts because I get tired of watering and I wait for those rains, and when they don't come, I'm out. Oh, I still got to get out and water.
Yeah.
And then so yeah, let's hope so.
All
but
right.
Then again, thank you so much.
All right, thank you,
All
Robert.
right.
My
and
pleasure.
You're listening to Cool 104.1, and thank you for watching the show, or listening to the show on the radio, or watching it on YouTube, our Coolfmlive. And this is Robert Ishoy, your host with Issues with Ishoy, and see you next month.